Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. Now, it's been nearly a decade since that famed story of a Verizon employee leveraging a VPN to outsource his job to privately hire workers in China. And back in 2013, remote employees accessing a company network was a less frequent occurrence than it is now. But today, studies are projecting that by 2025, 36 million American employees will work remotely. And HR professionals and business leaders alike are welcoming a newer, more flexible age of working arrangements to accommodate digital nomads working from home, and in some cases a partial return to the office, or hybrid work is a phrase we're hearing a lot of recently. But let's spare a thought for cybersecurity professionals, because they're the ones tasked with managing these ever-expanding digital boundaries. They no longer are just challenged with focusing on protecting the external network traffic and everything inside the organisation is safe. That is an outdated approach now. And managing users who are accessing company system and data from any location and any device is adding incredible layers of complexity to access control and authentication measures. And as an ex-IT guy, that is my bread and butter, as they would say over here. So in this new cybersecurity best practices discussion today, I've invited Jonathan Tomek, who's going to provide background knowledge on the importance of applying threat intelligence protocols to track, identify, and analyse IP address data to ensure safe working environments, regardless of how or where they're accessed. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Washington, DC, where you can join me and Jonathan from Digital Element, where we dive into this topic and discuss the best way forward. Massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Jonathan Tomek. I am the VP of Research and Development at Digital Element. And my job here is to come up with lots of methodologies when it comes to finding best ways to use GeoIP and making sure the integrity of the data is quality, such as in tracking VPNs or proxies or darknets and determining a lot of the context behind them and understanding any different traits that they may have, and coming up with new methods to figure out how GeoIP works.
And obviously that's an incredibly complex world that you frequent there. So if I was to take you back in time for a moment, can you remember where your passion for technology came from, or just something that might have possibly put you on the path that you're on today and opened up your curiosity to this world?
Wow, that is a fun question, because I would say I've always had this innate desire to learn since I was a child. But basically, I've wanted to always know how things work and just build upon everything. So I kind of graduated from learning a little bit about computers and to graduating into cybersecurity, as well as network forensics and malware tracking and hunting. And it all came up to right where I'm at, which is how do I help the people that are doing the same work that I used to do in the best way possible. So it kind of just kept evolving.
And of course, that path would eventually lead you to Digital Element. So can you tell me more about the story behind the company and maybe the kind of problems that you set out to solve with tech?
Sure. So I'm pretty new to the company. I have been here only about a year, and that's because they acquired my company. And effectively, how I got here was kind of an accident, if that makes any bit of sense. I ended up working a lot with their data and their technology, which is how we ended up finding a harmonious balance. But I've known about Digital Element for probably close to a decade now, about how them being one of the leading GeoIP companies in the world. And from that, I was actually doing quite a bit of work with figuring out not only about the VPNs and proxies earlier, but doing some other fun types of GeoIP data research. So that's kind of how I ended up here, at least from my side.
And one of the things that attracted me to your story was around the United States Marine Corps, because I think many listening won't associate that world with a career in threat intelligence. So I'm curious, is that becoming an increasingly common career path?
That's a good question. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily a common or increasingly common career path, for that matter speaking. That's the path that I chose. As I started in the Marine Corps, I did work a lot with cyber, as they call it. And it was something I always had a passion about. So that's where I really kept growing in that. And then from there, I coupled my experience of the cyber technology world with cybersecurity. And that's kind of how I ended up coming to be. The Marine Corps does have quite a bit of that still within it, for sure. And that's actually something they've been growing a lot with. In fact, they have a thing called the Cyber Auxiliary, which is something I was working with in helping them with their cyber threat intelligence.
And fast forward to present day, here in 2022, businesses are not only having to get to grips with things like hybrid working, but also distributed teams with employees scattered around the world, and many employees wanting to become digital nomads. Especially, I'm seeing more and more, like in Southeast Asia, there's more and more nations inviting people over to work there. So can you tell me more about the kind of risks in the workplace right now and what we're going to be seeing, and the importance of applying threat intelligence protocols to help track, identify and analyze IP address data, just to ensure we maintain these safe work environments regardless of where they're accessed, because there's so much going on there, isn't there, at the moment?
There is. This is a very, very big world, and we can talk about it from several different angles. One of those being there's legitimately decent people out there that want to have a secure infrastructure, that don't want to lie about where they're located. They just want to have a secure architecture and they can let their employees work anywhere. That's where a zero trust solution will come into play. But there's also, in that same boat, people that are not allowed to work remotely. So if you were, say, working for the government or somewhere that allows you to work from home, but you want to pretend you're working in a special location, say, hey, I'm working for the United States government. Some people have figured out that they've been able to circumvent a lot of these restrictions about saying where they are. Say, I want to live in Costa Rica, or I want to live in Italy for the summer or longer because of taxes, what have you. There's lots of reasons, but they need to pretend that they look like they're living in Washington, D.C. They would be able to circumvent a lot of these geo restrictions by leveraging a VPN through multiple layers, thus lying and not only about where they're located, but also posing a very interesting security risk, because you now have potentially people that are trying to break into your architecture or your systems in a remote country. What if you happen to go to, say, China, Russia, or any country anywhere? You now posed a brand new risk, and you still think that employee is working out of the United States. That's a pretty big risk. And that's happening a lot more frequently, as we've seen. There's a lot of people asking and inquiring on how to do things like this.
It really is. It's quite eye-opening there. And I'm curious, when you're working with your customers, where do you begin that journey when helping them understand how the contextual elements of an IP address and IP address data can actually be used to identify potentially dangerous users that could be accessing the organization's online platforms and quickly escalate reactive defenses? Because so much has changed now, especially with the zero trust mindset, and we're no longer just automatically trusting traffic within the network. And it just feels like such a game changer at the moment. And the traditional approaches no longer work, do they, or even apply?
Well, it's always a cat and mouse game when you think about anything in that sense. But everybody's always building the bigger, better mousetrap. But what's the right approach is always going to be your number one question. I mean, there's never going to be a silver bullet for sure. We're never going to have the perfect solution. But what we can do is start doing a lot of layering and discovery, which will then help with the problems. And one of the solutions that we had that we've discovered, at least in the sense of protecting people from lying about locations, is going to the source, go to the actual providers themselves to figure out how their services work, to ensure that we are doing the best that we can, not just saying that, hey, is somebody this is a VPN they're logging into, is this a proxy solution? No, we're actually trying to understand how the systems and services work so that we can give and provide the best information possible to companies to heighten their security posture. So it's back and forth, except we wanted to make sure we did it the right way.
And one of the big reasons I was excited to get you on the podcast today was because it's October is Cybersecurity Month, of course. And I'm sure you get asked this question almost on a daily basis. But what would you say are the best cybersecurity practices for analysing who's behind those sign-ons? And just for anybody listening anywhere in the world, whether if it's hybrid working, distributed teams, what is the best practices for or where to start on that?
Sure. Oh, this is always a fun one because every year I've been doing Cybersecurity Awareness Month since I started my career journey. But being that Digital Element is a Cybersecurity Awareness Month champion, we actually are providing a bunch of blog posts that are showing some of the solutions and the myths behind a lot of things that people might understand. But one of the biggest problem statements, I guess you could say, the things that kind of keep me up at night when I think of these issues is don't get complacent. So many places and organizations I see shrug off a lot of their security because nobody's going to bother me. And it's always round robin. It always comes back to kind of bite you. It's saying that if you're happy and you don't believe anybody's going to break into your house, why are you locking the doors? Why do you lock your car? A lot of people just go, you know what? I'm fine for 5 minutes. I'm fine for a day. And then they just get into this same cycle. And that really haunts a lot of organizations because they will get compromised because of some of that. And also with that same sense, it's be mindful of what you're doing. Like don't always put it in the back burner. Like make sure that you're trying, even if you're a company that doesn't necessarily know a lot about cybersecurity, pay attention to some of the news to make sure that you know, hey, what's happening in the world. That will really help you out.
And as it is Cybersecurity Month, I would expect that you're going to tech conferences, you're speaking on podcasts like this, helping to spread the word and helping people. But the question I've got to ask you is, what keeps you up at night, and how do you keep your curiosity and open-mindedness alive to better win that game of cat and mouse in cybersecurity?
Sure. Well, tailing off the last question, because I guess I kind of answered it in a way, but I can actually expand upon it. So I actually run a cybersecurity conference in Chicago every year called ThoughtCon, and with some of my friends. And I'm always curious about not only the newest techniques, but just how people are coming up with new solutions to problems that we never even knew about. I mean, as we get older, we kind of, our minds slowly go, oh, I don't know how this stuff works, but there's always somebody that's trying to solve a problem, trying to circumvent some sort of technology. So I really love to give back to the community by presenting at these conferences, going to them, as well as just providing puzzles for people to solve. And that really is what opens my mind to seeing what's the next thing, as well as, in a way, keeping me up at night, but also makes me happy knowing that where there's people trying to break in and do that, there's also the same people that are doing that are good, trying to solve the problems at the same time. So it's kind of a give and take there.
And I'm curious, when you're attending these conferences and you're having all these conversations with business leaders from all over the world, are there any trends in the kind of number one concerns that they're all facing right now, and how you're helping these businesses turn challenges like this into opportunities?
Yeah, one of the biggest problems is just finding the right people to fit the technology that comes out. I mean, there's only so many people in the world that know cybersecurity, and then only so many more on top of that can do it to the level that you're expecting. Kind of like, it's just go do it. And they're all running into these problems. So the solution that not just myself, but like the industry kind of is presenting is, well, let's push that work to a lot of the tools. So have have better quality data, have a better architecture so that it's maintained by less people. And then you don't have to have this constant problem of how do I maintain the best security posture possible because I don't have enough people to fulfill it. Well, use the tools and hire the right people on the staff to be able to solve some of those problems. And it works together. It works very well when you have the right people and the right tool at the same time. There's so many out there, but surprisingly, a lot of places have solved some of these major problems just through that.
And of course, finding the right people can be incredibly challenging on its own. And there's a well-publicized shortage of cybersecurity specialists around the world. And so much so, a lot of people or a lot of businesses are training internally. Is this something that you're seeing? And do you expect this to continue for many years?
I do. I absolutely see that problem. And that's kind of why I brought that up. And maybe I wasn't as clear to it, but basically cybersecurity, just technology is evolving so rapidly every day. I mean, that is, how many years ago did we finally get a cell phone, let alone what's the next upcoming thing that's going to be so innovative that we're going to have it. The trend that I've seen is, how do you find the right people to fit the right job? And how do you keep even the education and the certificates or what have you up to par with what's going on? And it's the only way that I've seen a lot of these places find the right people to fit those roles is by going to some of the conferences, by seeing like who are the people that really shine, like outshine everybody else and that are looking to solve the problems. The conferences have been the best way. I mean, through the networking process has been very, very good. But I don't know if I actually answered your question here, because this is a really tremendous problem that everybody has for sure.
No, I'm completely with you on that. And do you think we're heading towards an almost good AI versus bad AI, where businesses have the good AI and the bad guys are trying to leverage it for other ways? It's that cat and mouse game again, isn't it? It's just going to continue.
Well, it always will. I mean, I'm under the philosophy that nothing's new under the sun. Yeah. I mean, the same problems have existed since the beginning of time, whether it's like theft or envy, what have you. I mean, people are going to always try to break in and scam people, make money. And it's always going to go back and forth. Everybody's always, where there's bad, there's going to be good, etc. But will the AI solutions come out and help you? Maybe not. I mean, it's the same problem if you look at like chess. It's like, yes, there will be a computer system that will be able to beat every human possible in chess. But what happens when you start making the playing field larger, which is Go, like the game of Go? It's, you now have to have a massively hyper solution, like the quantum level, to be able to solve that can beat a human. Humans are always going to be able to outsmart their own technology. It's just the way it is. That's what the hacking concepts are. It's finding a problem and circumventing it, and being able to get into being able to make a tool do something it wasn't intended to do. Just because AI is part of it doesn't mean that there's not going to be somebody that won't be able to figure out how to get around that. And it will always happen. But there's also somebody thinking and knowing that that's going to happen, that's trying to solve that exact problem. Hence the big building a better mousetrap. It always goes that way. But the lowest hanging fruit is going to be 95% of the problem there. So if you can solve for that, I mean, we're talking down to the nitty gritty of just don't reuse passwords, or understand if somebody is trying to phish you. Those are surprisingly the most common tactics that still exist. So even if you had the most advanced AI, people still forget some of the lowest common denominators.
And I think there is so much to be hopeful for right now. As you said, employee education is improving. Boardrooms now start to see the value in cybersecurity, and most businesses are adopting more of a proactive than reactive approach to potential attacks. But what makes you hopeful or maybe even excited about the future?
I love that awareness has come up so much that the kids that are in technology now are understanding that it's not all just butterflies and rainbows when you're going online, that they are anything that's coming to them, such as who's sending this message, or what would happen if I do this? Mind you, not every person thinks that way, but I see a big trend upward of people that are naturally curious, that know how to use technology, that are able to make sure that they're secure. I think that's fantastic. And then the abundance of tools that are out there now that make, like, even password single sign-on and things like that are coming out that just make all of these solutions easier. I love that. I love seeing everybody work towards the common goal. That's what definitely makes me very hopeful about what's up and coming.
Now, we started the podcast talking about your origin story, what put you on this path, but I'm also now going to ask you to leave another note of inspiration, and that is maybe a song that we can add to our Spotify playlist, or a book that has inspired you or that you can recommend that we'll add to our Amazon wish list for everyone listening. What is it that you'd like to leave us with?
I actually have a book, one that's really taken me through my entire career path, if that's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the book that I recommend, it's called Stealing the Network. It's actually a collection of books, but the first one was called How to Steal a Network. And this is by a few different authors, but basically it goes through a story about many different hacking techniques and showing how somebody thinks through the process, as well as even going into the technical level of how it even happened. And I find it really fascinating because it pulls you in like a James Bond story almost, where you're learning a lot about what's happening. You get to see a little bit of the technical, or overpass it if you don't understand it, and just be in the mind of somebody that's trying to hack into something. I find it such a fascinating book, and I always love to recommend this book.
Awesome. I'll add that to the Amazon wish list. I'll be checking that out myself. I'm
Sure.
Intrigued there. And before I let you go, for anyone listening that just wants to find out more information about Digital Element, how to contact your team, or just find out more information, what's the best starting point for everything?
The best starting point would just be to go to our website, thedigital.element.com. You can find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. I know we have a bunch of methodologies there, and email is just as good as any.
Awesome. Well, I cannot thank you enough for coming on here today. You've got such a rich experience in intelligence research, with your background in network forensics, incident handling, malware analysis, so many other areas. I feel we could have just carried on for a couple of hours here. So I will get you back on next year and find out how things are progressing and any insights you can share with us around cybercrime and espionage teams and how they can better leverage technology. But more than anything, just thanks again for joining me today, Jonathan. Really enjoyed chatting with you.
Well, thank you for having me. It was absolutely wonderful.
So a big thank you for Jonathan for coming on here today and sharing his background knowledge on the importance of applying threat intelligence protocols needed to track, identify and analyse IP address data to ensure safe working environments, regardless of how they are accessed. It was great hearing from an expert who's got first-hand experience of helping the world's top businesses across every essential service industry better understand the contextual elements of IP address data and how it can be used to identify potentially dangerous users accessing the organisation's online platforms and quickly escalate those reactive defences. But hey, that's just my takeaway from today's conversation. You've heard from me, you've heard from Jonathan, but what about you? How are you and your organisation better using IP address intelligence to protect your company network? What has worked? What hasn't worked? What lessons have you learned? And I know this is a topic affecting every single person and business out there, so please send me an email, techblogwriter@outlook.com. If you'd sooner just hit record on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, etc., you can just hold down record and send me a quick voicemail. Just say, hey Neil, this is my thoughts on today's conversation. We could even play that on a future episode and I'll give you a direct answer. And I'm easy to find on those platforms too, just at Neil C. Hughes on just about anything. So let's keep this conversation going, put all these ideas and experiences into a giant melting pot, and maybe together we can move forward with a few solutions. That is my cheesy dream and motivation for me recording this podcast every day. But it's quitting time for me, so a big thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.